As we do so, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, it has to be a change of mindset also, an attitude, a lot of societal change, apart from the institutional changes which we need to bring about. And Brands Academy has always had a tradition of inviting a person who has been an achiever, who's a contributor, who actually can make a difference and bring about these changes in the position he or she is, and the means he or she has can bring about this transformation. Someone who's been expressive, someone who has been, can also bring about a change in terms of the thoughts and ideas being put forward. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we have an extremely charismatic personality present with us. In fact, a very fascinating woman who is a legend in her own times. An author, a writer, columnist, an opinion maker and an opinion shaper. A social commentator whose views and ideas and expressions are actually considered an authority on the popular content. And I feel, and this is my personal view, and I'm sure many people must be also sharing the same view, she's extremely bold and beautiful. Bold I call because of the views she's been able to put forward. She's been a daredevil, never shun away from calling a spade a spade. She's been beautiful in her thoughts and expression, especially the way she has portrayed the Indian women in her novels, in her writings. Someone who's a great blend of femininity, of assertiveness, sensuality, sexuality. Someone who does not shy away from the pleasures and combining her career, children, marriage, and being fair to all the roles which she is playing. Someone who is also traditional domestic femininity she portrays, and someone who is, yes, a woman of substance, who wants that freedom, who wants to be in this world to be recognized and have her own identity. And in fact, ladies and gentlemen, she herself with that woman, what she portrays in the novel, and I'm sure all the people who are going to be receiving awards today are going to be feeling really proud to be receiving the award from a very progressive and very intellectual woman. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting to you, Ms. Shobha De. Would like to invite you, ma'am, here. Truly, truly a great pleasure to be meeting you in person here. Read your columns, big fan of your... yes, a couple of times I also have disagreed on certain thoughts, but I think that is...
Thank you for a very generous introduction.
Thank you so much. And now the stage is all yours. Would like to know your views.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That was really a wonderful, wonderful introduction. I was wondering whether you were talking indeed about me. But I must compliment you on the way you have conducted this very important and prestigious ceremony. It's very rarely that one comes across a presenter who is not just well-informed, but also passionate about what he or she says on an occasion and doesn't merely mouth platitudes. It's clearly a subject that means a lot to you, and for me it's been an education really on many levels, listening to some of the statistics, and it gives me great pleasure to be here with all of you. This is the 8th edition of the awards, and it's very commendable to see the kind of brains that are in the audience. I wish we had much more time to share many more views, because each person who's expressed a view this afternoon has given us a nugget to take home, to think about. I particularly appreciated the gentleman who spoke about the Teach for India program. And I have to share with you that I have a young friend, a friend of my daughter's, in fact, just 25 years old, coming from what is called a very elite background. The best top schools, she's just gotten into Harvard, parents who are extremely liberal, progressive, educated, dynamic, affluent. And she could have picked any corporate job of her choice. And she said, absolutely not. Teach for India is what I want to do. She spent 2 years teaching in a municipal school in Mumbai. And at the end of it all, because I meet with her so frequently, she told me that despite the early hurdles, where she was not accepted because she didn't look like everybody else. And even the teachers rejected her because they said, oh, who is this rich girl coming to teach our kids? The kids themselves were extremely hostile to her. And the boys in the 8th grade, which she was teaching, actually the first day that she arrived, and her name is Malika, they started singing Malika Sherawat songs and calling her an item girl, an item number, and so on. 2 of them or 3 of them got very aggressive. They came and broke a chair on her table and said, we are not used to being taught by women. And all our teachers so far have been men, and please, you go home where you've come from. Now, this young girl's determination is what impressed me so much. She took it for 2 months till she managed to then convince them about her level of commitment and won them over. And it's been 2 years, and now when she's leaving for Harvard and she's doing her farewell classes, all those very same children are crying and saying, please don't leave us. So, you know, it has a transformative, almost magical power over people, education. And like you rightly said, that learning never ever stops. Yeah, the day you stop learning, the day your mind is shut, you're dead. And I think, personally speaking, I've raised 6 children. I have 2 grandchildren. I learn from my children and I learn from my grandchildren much more than any professor has ever been able to teach me. And I was of that generation where teaching itself was seen as a chore, which it should never be. It was something that you had to get through because your parents expected you to. I was told, as long as you get a degree, we don't care what you do after that. And it was particularly hard for me because I came from a bureaucratic background and my siblings were all brilliant academics, a surgeon, a lawyer, an engineer. IIT Kharagpur, as a matter of fact, second batch. So for the youngest child to not be that interested in academics also indicated, well, to my parents it must have indicated a lack of ambition. They read it wrong. They must have thought she doesn't have the aptitude, she's too lazy, she doesn't really want, she's not an achiever like her siblings. I think a lot of parents make that mistake, and a lot of schools and colleges make that mistake too, where they don't recognize those 2 very important qualities that you did mention, intuition and imagination. And not every child is the same. Not every child is programmed to have the same gifts, the same abilities. And if we don't recognize individuality in our children, and if we don't encourage them to become people and persons in their own right, we are in fact stifling and crushing a young life. And you make them feel defeated, you make them feel like losers. And the level of competition being what it is, sometimes one feels sorry for the teachers too, because how do you grade? What do you do? We are also very insensitive when it comes to children with special needs. We do not recognize that they need a different approach to education. We simply don't have maybe the bandwidth to absorb children, say a dyslexic child. And now when I look back on my own school years where I struggled so much with simple arithmetic, I still can't do it. I'd still flunk a grade 3 exam or a grade 5. It was perhaps because it wasn't recognized then. I must have been mildly dyslexic. You know, numbers didn't speak to me, they still don't. And I did feel so defeated on so many times because to appear for a senior Cambridge exam, being compelled to take subjects I had no aptitude for, physics and geometry and trigonometry and higher math, it just made me feel I have no hope in my life to get further, and I had no incentive to study further till, thanks to my sports training and my sports background, I switched disciplines, switched to liberal arts, and then, of course, there was no looking back. It was a totally different experience I felt in my own world. We have to recognize the worlds of our children and respect them and respect their minds. And to the other gentleman who talked about the little person asking about the fuel, it was a very, very intelligent question. It was not meant, it didn't come from a naughty mind, it came from a very curious mind. And very often we don't have the patience to recognize curiosity in children, and they become tiresome to us because they can't stop questioning adults. But they're not doing it to annoy us, they're doing it because they are seekers of knowledge in the real sense. It's only later in life that they become conditioned and they start thinking even about knowledge in a very, very, in channels, that I have to be knowledgeable about this because this is going to help me in my exams. And that broader sense of wonder and curiosity leaves them. And that is again such a tragedy because in our world we don't have the space to accommodate every curious child. When I heard the statistic, 600 million people, it is something that is so daunting, and it's, I would say, one of our country's biggest shames that we have this statistic and we haven't been able to do as much as we can to rectify it and bring that statistic down. On the other hand, there's also the mismatch of a very highly educated lot of very young people with no jobs. So it's become a bit of a vicious circle where you have fantastic colleges, some of the best colleges in the world in India. We have competitive students. We have educated millions of very, very highly educated minds. And they are feeling so frustrated and demoralized because where are the jobs? So that is a sort of a situation that the new administration, the new government will have to address very, very aggressively if we are going to compete fairly and call ourselves a global power. We have to channelize our resources. We have to be able to build on these strengths of our young. And more than half of India is under the age of 30. So that's a huge number of incredibly restless, energetic, and ambitious people. And if we cannot harness their intelligence and their ambition, we'll be doing the country a huge disservice. We'll be doing an entire generation a great disservice. So this is something that we need to think about. Of course, the skills that are needed, and all of you today who I'm looking forward to spending time with and giving the awards to, have in your own ways done exactly that, and you have recognized excellence, and you yourselves have been achievers in the fields that you have chosen for yourself. So it is with a room like this gives you a sense of optimism and a sense of buoyancy, that with the right-minded people guiding young minds and making sure that their abilities and their skills are channelized in the right way, and they remain motivated and they remain productive. I think that is really the message for the future of our country. Because when I look back also at some of my early experiences with people around me, I think one of the saddest words one would hear would be "main unpad hoon." You know, I still hear that word. So many years later, that word "unpad," it shouldn't be a part of our vocabulary at all. No Indian should ever have to confess "main unpad hoon." And that should really be the aim of people like yourselves and all of us together. I'm sure we can do it, and I look forward to the rest of the afternoon. And congratulations once again to the Academy for the awards, and to all the winners here and everybody in the room. Thank you for inviting me to share this experience with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for all these beautiful thoughts. And in fact, as you mentioned, that main unpad hoon. You know, a couple of times when I speak to my maid, the same thing she says, मुझे सिर्फ अपना नाम लिखना आता है. So I was in fact the other day laughing. मैंने कहा तुम तो पढ़ी लिखी हो. Indian definition के according you're actually educated. And that is what they feel when they go to for some, say, Aadhaar card or something, how they are fooled. Education probably is the only way where you can empower people, you can give them a sense of what is right and what is wrong. Things need to drastically change in this country, I think. A lot needs to be done.
End with a chota story which has to do with also unpad, and how people who are deprived and neglected by our own society, by all of us. There's a driver who works in our home, he's been there for at least 20 years, who is technically completely and totally unpad. He can't even write his name. And yet he's a very, very competent driver. He's from Bihar, and he's working in an environment in Mumbai which is extremely demanding of every professional, whether you are Shah Rukh Khan or an unknown driver. The city makes you that, in a way, aggressive. And I have noticed how he has, in his own ways, tried to overcome this, I would call it a huge disadvantage. And he's done it by just memorizing visual symbols, because he can't read the names of roads, for example. So if one of us tells him, go to Pedder Road, and wahan likha hoga Pedder Road hai, ya ye raste pe jaiye, aap wahan jaiye, he cannot read. So he will ask me that, give me a visual reference of that area, and he finds the place. He finds it probably in a shorter time than the other guys who know, who can read Hindi, who can read English, and can ask questions which they don't have to embarrass themselves, because if he stops under a sign, someone is bound to say, can't you read? Aapko dikhai nahi de raha hai, you're right under it. So there is so much shame involved, and my heart breaks, because it's, he feels it's too late for him. He's now in his 50s. But I keep urging him. I said, you know, there's night school, there is, the desire, he said he would feel ashamed to be confessing within the community that he's completely illiterate. We have to remove that shame, and that is really my big message for all of you today.
Thank you so much.